Hello! In this one, we're going to take a look at the grease pencil feature in Blender version 2.83. It's been a few years since I did any projects in Blender, and I downloaded the new 2.83 and started playing around with the grease pencil and was able to make some really cool effects with it. If you'll notice, as Fred walks into the shadows, the color of the grease pencil object actually changes. So the scene lighting can affect your grease pencil objects, and that's really, really cool. If I pause the animation here, let's go over to frame 50. So Fred and the pterodactyl are grease pencil objects, and everything else are 3D objects. So if I zoom in, you'll notice as I rotate around, they're flat. Fred and the pterodactyl, while everything else is true 3D. So you can combine everything and make some really cool effects. If I come over here and turn on this point light, you can see how it's affecting Fred. And a cool feature of this is you can actually do it by the layers of your grease pencil. So if I come down to my layers on Fred and there's a use lights option for each layer, if I don't want his arm to be affected by the light, I can just turn that off. Let me kill this point light so you can see that a little better. So you can see now his arm is not being affected by the scene lights, but it is now. So you can do a lot of cool things. So since the pterodactyl's up high, I don't have any scene lights affecting this grease pencil object, but I do Fred as he walks around the car. So in this video, I'm just going to go over some grease pencil basics, show a speed drawing of Wilma, and then we'll take a heart drawing and show how you can add animation to these objects. To quickly get into creating grease pencil objects in Blender, when you open it, select 2D animation from the new file option, and that'll quickly get you in and get you set up and ready to go. You have multiple modes, tools, and options in this. So for example, if I want to change my brush radius manually, I can do that. I can turn my pen pressure on and off up here. I can set the strength up here as well, and I can turn the pen pressure on and off on that as well. I can change my pencil to pens, airbrush. So I'm going to pick a pen, and I'm just going to draw a line. So those curves are really rough. You have a stroke option up here, and you can pick stabilize stroke. And when you do that, it will help you get your curves better. So you don't have to be able to draw perfect lines and curves to make artwork, because there's a lot of tools in here to help you. One really neat tool is the Scissor Cutter over here. So let's say that I have two lines intersect like that, and I wanted that to be a right angle. I can come over here to the scissor tool, and it perfectly cuts them out. So that's a really useful tool. One of the really nice modes you can hop into is Sculpt Mode. And in Sculpt Mode, you can do some really cool things with these tools. So this top one is for smoothing out. So if I want to smooth this line out, I can press F and scale my brush up a little bit. As I go over it, you can see those curves start smoothing out, because these are basically lines with lots of vertices in them, and that's how it's able to straighten things out. You have a grab tool if you want to move sections of it around. You can actually grab whole sections and drag them around. So really, really useful tool. Come back to smooth, and it'll start smoothing all that out for you. If I come back to draw mode, you can fill objects. So let's come down here and let's draw a square over here. So you can come to your paint bucket tool and you can fill it with colors. So I'm going to come over here to my materials and we'll just make a new one. And we'll tell it it's fill. And let's make it blue. So you can do lots of things that you probably have done in things like GIMP, and you have multiple layers. If you come over to your object data properties, that's where your layers are. So you can build multiple layers. You can merge your layers together, delete layers, all kinds of cool things like that. So this is just a really basic, just intro to this. And no means an expert on it. I'm kind of learning as I go myself, but it's some pretty neat tools to help you do artwork. So next I'm going to show a speed drawing of Wilma Flintstone, and after that we'll animate a heart. So I start out just drawing some curves in, sketching out roughly what Wilma looks like. You can see me cut over to the sculpting tools a lot to move my lines around, smooth them out after I draw them. So I'm just going through now and kind of getting the shape roughly the way I want it. Now I'm going through and thickening the lines up a little bit. Now I'm adding the colors. Now I come in with the sculpt tool and reshape her head and hair quite drastically to make it look more like Wilma. Just kind of polish up the remaining lines a little bit. And there you have it. Now we'll take just a brief quick look at how you can animate your grease pencil. So at the bottom we have a timeline that shows the number of frames in the animation. So I'm going to go to frame 4 and I'm going to flip over to edit mode. I'm going to select everything, hit S, and just scale it up just a little bigger. Going to rotate it just a little bit. Now if you'll notice this gray background, you can see what the previous frame looked like. That's the onion skin on your layer, and you can turn that on and off over on your layers. But it's nice to have it on because it gives you a reference of what your previous frame looked like. So with that, let's go to sculpt mode and scale my brush up a little bit. I got my grab tool. I'm going to exaggerate some of this just a little bit. Maybe right there. So I'm just using the grab tool. Maybe a little bit right. So let's go with that right there. So now I want it to return back to frame 1 on, let's say, frame 7. So I can go to frame 1, hit Shift D to duplicate, and then, oops, I had them both selected. Hit Shift D to duplicate on frame 1, and we'll pull it over to frame 7. And then we want to pause in between the beats. So let's go to frame 12. So if I come down here, I can change my end frame of the animation. So we're showing frames 1 through 12. Let's see what this looks like. So that's just a basic animation to show you kind of how it works. Now, suppose you want to pull it into a model scene that you're going to have animated over 250 frames, but you want to keep the heart beating as you're moving it. The way you do that is, let's go back and change our timeline back to 250 frames. I can go to frame 1 and I can add a time offset modifier, and we want it to loop frames 1 through 12. We'll keep looping those across the whole 250 frames of the timeline. So let's see how that works. So you can see it's just going to keep looping. So that's how I kept Fred's legs moving and kept the pterodactyl's wings flapping as they moved across the scene. So this was just a quick basic overview of grease pencil, some of the things you can do with it. If you'd like to check this stuff out, Blender is completely free. You can go to blender.org, you can download it and start playing with it. Thank you for watching.